It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13 as Winston Smith, a frail figure with a varicose ulcer above his ankle, slipped into the hallway of Victory Mansions. The oppressive atmosphere was immediately apparent. The hall smelled of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. Dominating the space was a large colored poster depicting an enormous, heavy black mustachioed face, the face of a man about 45. Beneath this watchful image ran the caption, "Big Brother is watching you." Inside his flat, the ubiquitous telescreen, an oblong metal plaque resembling a dull mirror, babbling fruity voices about the production of pig iron, served as the ultimate tool of control. Winston could dim the voice, but there was no way of shutting the instrument off completely. The telescreen received and transmitted simultaneously, meaning any sound above a low whisper would be picked up, and every movement, except in darkness, was scrutinized by the omnipresent, terrifying thought police. Winston looked out at London, the chief city of Airstrip 1, a place marked by rotting 19th-century houses, bombed sites, and the soaring Ministry of Truth, Minitru. Minitru was an enormous pyramidal structure of glittering white concrete, startlingly different from everything else, and on its face were engraved the 3 definitive slogans of the party: "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength." Equally immense were the ministries of peace, plenty, and the most frightening of all, the Ministry of Love, Minilove, which had no windows and was guarded by gorilla-faced men. In a small alcove where he was invisible to the telescreen, Winston prepared to commit thought crime. He gulped down a teacupful of foul-smelling Victory gin, which tasted like nitric acid, then took out a pen and a beautiful, quarto-sized blank book purchased furtively from a slum junk shop. Marking the creamy paper was the decisive act. He wrote the date, April 4th, 1984, realizing the absolute impossibility of verifying the date. He quickly began pouring out his frustrated monologue, describing a grotesque film where a refugee ship was bombed and the audience cheered as a child's arm flew into the air, while a prole woman alone shouted. They didn't oughter have showed it not in front of kids. Winston's treasonous thoughts were interrupted by Mrs. Parsons, a crushed-looking neighbor, asking him to fix her blocked kitchen sink. In her apartment, the Spies Organization banners hung on the wall, and her children, a 9-year-old boy and his younger sister, immediately yelled, "You're a traitor, you're a thought criminal," and menaced him with a toy pistol. Winston realized that almost all children were now systematically turned into ungovernable little savages by the party, acting as spies against their own parents. The children were disappointed. They had missed a hanging of Eurasian war prisoners scheduled for that evening. Later that day, in the records department, Winston attended the 2 Minutes Hate. The face of Emmanuel Goldstein, the enemy of the people and supposed commander of the conspiratorial brotherhood, flashed onto the screen. The hate created a hideous ecstasy of fear and vindictiveness that compelled all participants to join in the screaming frenzy. It was during this emotional chaos, while everyone chanted "BB," that Winston briefly exchanged a significant glance with O'Brien, an inner party member. Winston felt an unmistakable message had passed, confirming his long-held belief that O'Brien was secretly an enemy of the party and was on his side. Winston's job at Minitru involved rectification, the daily falsification of historical records, making sure the party was always shown to be correct in its predictions. All history was a palimpsest, continually rewritten, ensuring that no evidence remained of any previous version. If the party controlled all records and all memories, then who controls the present controls the past. This process relied on doublethink, the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously and accept both. His colleague, Syme, a specialist working on the Newspeak dictionary, explained that the ultimate goal of the language was to narrow the range of thought by destroying words, thereby making thought crime literally impossible. Syme cited the example of replacing bad with the simpler and more rigidly defined ungood. Newspeak was designed not to extend, but to diminish the range of thought. Winston, recognizing Syme's dangerous intellectual clarity, decided with sudden deep conviction that Syme would soon be vaporized for being too intelligent. Winston's growing rebellion was suddenly fueled by Julia, the dark-haired girl he had long suspected of being a thought police spy. She slipped him a note that read, "I love you." This was a turning point. His desire to stay alive welled up, and the act of their first sexual encounter in the secluded Golden Country, a landscape from Winston's dreams, was experienced as a political act. Julia, a rebel from the waist downwards, explained that the party suppressed the sexual instinct because its resulting emotional energy could be transformed into the fury of the 2 minutes hate and leader worship. They secured a safe haven, a room above Mr. Charrington's junk shop, which, miraculously, contained no telescreen. In this room, Winston felt utterly alone and secure, a feeling he called an ancestral memory. He cherished the antique glass paperweight with a fragment of coral inside, seeing it as a little chunk of history that they've forgotten to alter. The long-awaited contact with O'Brien occurred when O'Brien, in the ministry corridor, managed to reference the now unpersoned Syme, a deadly signal. Winston visited O'Brien's luxurious inter-party flat, where O'Brien demonstrated his privilege by turning off the telescreen. Winston confessed their status as thought criminals and adulterers, and they swore an oath to the Brotherhood, agreeing to commit anything from murder to corruption, though Winston refused to agree to separation from Julia. O'Brien confirmed that the ultimate crime was not the overt act, but betrayal of their feelings. O'Brien gave Winston Goldstein's book, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism. Winston, reading in the safety of the room, learned that the war, which perpetually involved Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia, was not for victory but for the continuous destruction of surplus goods, preventing the masses from achieving prosperity and becoming intellectually dangerous. The party's aim was to perpetuate unfreedom and inequality. The inner party maintains its position by enforcing doublethink, requiring members to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously. In fact, the slogan "War is Peace" meant that the war was entirely a domestic affair, waged by the ruling group against its own subjects to preserve the social structure. Winston was reading that the object of the party's rule was pure power. O'Brien later elaborated that power meant inflicting pain and humiliation. The object of power is power. When Winston asked how the party could deny external reality, O'Brien tortured him, demanding he see 5 fingers when O'Brien was holding up 4. Winston eventually screamed, "5! 5! 5!" The rebellion ended when, while Winston and Julia were together in their room, an iron voice declared, "You are the dead." Mr. Charrington, the junk shop owner, entered the room and was revealed to be a disguised officer of the thought police. The glass paperweight was smashed. Winston endured months of torture and beatings in the Ministry of Love, the place where there is no darkness. O'Brien, acting as his interrogator, protector, and friend, made it clear they did not merely destroy enemies, but change them and capture their inner mind. O'Brien showed Winston his emaciated body in the mirror and described the future as a boot stamping on a human face forever. Winston, although broken, clung to the last shred of loyalty. I have not betrayed Julia. The final step in his cure was room 101, the place that contained the worst thing in the world. For Winston, this was rats. As a wire cage containing large, hungry rats was brought close to his face, Winston succumbed to the unendurable pressure. He screamed frantically, transferring his punishment to the only person left to him. Do it to Julia! Do it to Julia! Not me, Julia, not me. Winston was later released, physically restored but emotionally hollowed out, having achieved the required internal surrender. He met Julia briefly in the park, where they confessed their mutual betrayal. He returned to his usual corner in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, drinking victory gin, which had become his life, his death, and his resurrection. When news of a glorious war victory came over the telescreen, Winston felt the final, healing change. He gazed at the portrait of Big Brother and understood. The struggle was finished, and he had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother,